Joining us now in studio is former Minister in the Presidency, Essop Pahad. Mr. Pahad, thank you so much
thank you for the invitation.
For making the time. Now, of course, a struggle veteran yourself, having carried the baton in exile to liberate South Africa under the leadership of the former president. What was perhaps your most significant memory of the man?
There are many. There are many when I was still a young kid, and he used to come regularly to my parents' flat, and you saw this very powerful man, very handsome, charismatic in every way. So we, in a sense, grew up in front of him. So the memories of him are long. I have memories of him during the treason trial, during the Rivonia trial, when attended the Rivonia trial. And then obviously we were in exile and he was in prison. So after we came back from exile and he was released from prison, I served in Deputy President Mbeki's office as a Deputy Minister, so had a lot of dealings with Mandela at that time. He was the president, I was a member of the NEC of the ANC, so attended many meetings presided over by him. And so the memories of Mandela are always, and that applies, I think, to anybody who's met him, unforgettable.
Mr. Pahad, you met him in your personal capacity as well as worked with him in your professional space, but any key things in his personality? Some people talk about the humor, his humility. Any stories regarding that you might be able to share?
Well, I have a good memory when, in 1961, he had gone into the underground, and a few of us were told to go to a specific house, it's called Malaykam, it's part of Ferreirastown. And they said, go there, go to this house, and we just waited. And a man walked in, dressed as a night watchman. And that was Mandela, and even then, his personality just came through. And he then talked to us about banning of the ANC and how we needed to carry on with the work, and that he was in the underground, and therefore the struggle is going to be very, very much more difficult. After that, of course, he had got arrested. So this memory of this great revolutionary who was fearless. And so he inspired those of us who were at the meeting to say, it doesn't matter what happens, we must carry on the struggle. And after we came out, I found Mandela always very ready to listen. But whenever I visited him, or we visited together with my brother Aziz, and even if there were a lot of other people in the room, he would talk about my mother. A little bit about my father, but all the time about my mother. And he would say she was one of the most wonderful women he's ever met in his life. And he says so in his biography too. And so they used to come and eat at my parents' house all the time. And then he would say, now you see, this, I knew him when he was a little boy. And now he's my boss. He's the minister in the presidency, and I'm nothing here sitting in this house. And so it was always such a pleasure to talk to him, and he had such a remarkable memory of the past, even when he was not well, and he had difficulty following a conversation as you were talking. But his memory of the past, and when he used to talk about the past and talk about the past struggle and what was happening and what we had to do and what we did, it was phenomenal. You just sat there quite marveling at Madiba's recall of what happened, and factually very accurate. So for us it was always a pleasure just to go and sit with him and just talk to him and just watch him, even if he's sitting in his nice armchair, and just the confidence he used to exude, the beautiful smile he used to have, and the friendly way in which he would talk about things. Also, when he was the president, he would phone people 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. Have you read the newspapers? Did you see? The newspapers said this, then what do you people think? What are we going to do? What are we going to say? So he was always on the ball with respect to what was happening and always wanted to respond to issues as they arose. So he had no fear in terms of saying, let us respond. He had no fear in expressing his views. But I think one of his greatest strengths was his capacity to listen. And if you say something and you disagreed with him and you convinced him that perhaps he was a bit mistaken, he would change his mind. So he never had this air that what he knows everything. And that's why it was so always wonderful to engage with Mandela, obviously, of course. Mandela was for us an icon. So it was always just a pleasure to sit with him. But he disarmed you by the way he dealt with you when you were sitting with him, even in a one-on-one meeting or even in a bigger meeting. And so he had this remarkable capacity to make you feel at ease.
Perhaps let's go back to a time that you've mentioned when Nelson Mandela was on Robben Island, and many of you, the veterans that we celebrate today, were in exile. How did he manage to keep the hope burning that indeed the struggle that you were up against at that particular time was one worthwhile, but secondly that it was going to come to fruition?
I would say that one of the most successful international solidarity campaigns that we conducted was the Release Mandela and All Other Political Prisoners campaign. And that helped to project the image of Mandela, and that made him an international icon. And I remember I had to go to Glasgow, where the apartheid regime's offices were, their consulate, and I had to rename the street after Mandela, and it was raining. And years later, somebody from England came to visit us at our house here in Joburg. And she said, I want to tell you something. It was raining. I said, no, I know it was raining. I renamed the street. She said, and I was a little baby, and my mother put me in a pram and took me there and said, now you are going to say we're renaming the street.
Wow.
So it was fantastic the way people responded to him. So yes, now she's a grown-up woman with her own children telling the story about how the mother insisted that she's going to go with her in the rain to witness the change of the street. So in that sense, Mandela had a profound influence on people.
Mr. Pahad, before you go, just looking at the leadership landscape in South Africa at the moment, lots of upset regarding Labour, government, as well as the private sector's contribution into moving forward as one unit. And not too long ago, we had Chris Bishop, one of our contributors here, and he was getting questions from the international community regarding whether South Africa will go back to an apartheid regime. Doesn't it almost make you feel as though your efforts
we will never go back to Nepal. I don't know what Chris was talking about.
No. One of the international correspondents asked him that question. But just your response, if you could speak to the world today.
No, that's a lot of nonsense. We'll never go back. And there is no way in which anybody could even dare to imagine that they can take us back to an authoritarian, anti-democratic, anti-people state. That is never going to happen in this country. That we face many problems, yes. That at the point at which we needed his leadership, we didn't have it, but life goes on. And you have to operate with the material you have at hand. And if you ask me, am I confident about the future of this country? Yes, I am very confident. In my interaction, and as an editor of a magazine called The Thinker, with young South Africans, I am so proud of these young South Africans. They're so bright, they're so energetic, they have so much drive. They've succeeded so much in their lives. These are black kids. who under apartheid would never have had the opportunity. And so they just make you so proud of being a South African. You look at them and you say, no, it doesn't matter what happens, the country will be in good hands. So I'm always very confident about the future of our country.
Well, at least you know that your efforts were not in vain.
No, thanks.
And on that positive note, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, that